My foreign policy will always put the interests of the American people and American security above all else. America first will be the major and overriding theme of my administration.
Donald Trump unveiling his foreign policy vision this week in Washington, and we're back now with the panel. Well, George, the Trump campaign made a big deal about this foreign policy speech, saying that the candidate was putting some policy meat on the bones of his campaign. How did he do?
Well, it's like a Cornish game hen. It's mostly bone, I'm afraid, not much meat. He said our foreign policy should be disciplined, deliberate, and consistent, but unpredictable. Now, they may be able to square that circle. There was a time during the Vietnam peace negotiations when Nixon, it was called the madman theory, wanted to convince them that he was a little bit cracked and that they might want to negotiate for that reason. Mr. Trump said we should abide by our agreements, except the trade agreements that have brought the world together through the World Trade Organization, which he promises, I think, to repudiate.
And the Iran deal.
And the Iran deal. He also referred to our problems with Russia as a cycle of hostility, which is a kind of way of postulating moral equivalence. They do something, we do something, everyone's to blame. And finally, he said, Obama has made Iran a great power. That seems to me an example of what's been called narcissistic policy disorder, the belief that everything that happens in the world is because of something we did or didn't do. And it sort of inflates the American role at a time when Mr. Trump was trying, I think, to withdraw America's role and shrink it a bit.
Kimberly, do you see a coherent Trump policy, or is it mostly just assurances, trust me, I'll make it work?
Well, you can see the Trump doctrine that he's trying to develop by saying that he wants to build up our military because there has been significant military cuts. We need to do that. We need to be able to, I think, modify drastically the rules of engagement, which have been crippling in many instances to those that go overseas to fight for us. And when you look at the juxtaposition of the failed foreign policies of the past 8 years of President Barack Obama, the nation and the military is willing and ready for a change. We are not doing better in a better position in the Middle East. Failure to engage with proper status of forces agreements in place. We have lost tremendous ground in the Middle East. You look at the rise of ISIS, the caliphate. That's what the country is seeing. And we need a strong leader, somebody that's going to have the right people in place. What I think would be significant is to get the right team, including perhaps even a vice presidential pick, a strong general, someone like a Petraeus or someone with significant foreign policy experience like a Condoleezza Rice would be an outstanding choice.
Do you know something?
Well, I know that I'm interested in having a Republican in the White House. And if
well,
the
no, but I mean, do you have some idea
Donald
that he's going to appoint?
I'm telling you, it'll be very different. Once he gets the nomination, you will see how many people are going to get on board and want to take back the White House and prevent Hillary Clinton from getting back in and having the same policies that she's been tethered to with Barack Obama.
Karl, it was interesting talking about Clinton and Trump. I asked Trump about the fact that he seems, you know, he talked in a sense like a liberal Democrat about we need to stop spending so much overseas, we need to spend more building up at home. How would it work if you had a campaign in which, in effect, the Republican nominee was running on foreign policy to the left of the Democratic nominee?
Well, he may attempt to do that. For example, in his remarks in his speech, he attacked her for, as she and President Obama, for having removed Gaddafi from power. The problem is he at the same time was out there saying Gaddafi needs to be removed from power. There are so many contradictions. George touched on a couple. Let me add a couple more. He said no more foreign wars, and yet we're going to remove ISIS, quote, it is going to be gone quickly. Well, how do you remove ISIS gone quickly if you don't send American troops abroad? He said we're going to end nation building, no more, quote, spreading universal values that not everyone shares or wants. And in the next sentence says, instead, we're going to strengthen and promote Western civilization and its accomplishment. Well, that sounds like those universal values of respect for human rights and rule of law. But look, I agree with George. There was no plan here. We're going to quickly balance the trade deficit with China. Quickly balance. How are you going to do that? There are going to be consequences.
Well, he says we're going to be tough and we're going to threaten and we'll raise tariffs. No,
well, he didn't.
That's what he's saying.
He didn't say that in that speech. And look, we need to have the meat on the bone, so to speak. There are going to be consequences for companies opening facilities abroad in that speech. We're going to rebuild our military. It's going to be, quote, funded beautifully. Well, this is a guy who says I'm going to erase the $19 trillion debt in the next 8 years, during which our government is expected, under current laws, to spend $38 trillion. We're going to cut the federal budget in half. Then we're going to cut taxes by $10 trillion. And somehow we're going to beautifully rebuild our...
Okay, so when it comes to Trump, I'm going to put you down as a definite maybe.
Well, look,
I got to move on here. Because last night, let's get to the really important thing, was the White House Correspondents Dinner. The Nerd Promise it's called, and President Obama's final appearance there, and there was some buzz about what he was going to do. The showstopper was a video that he put on where he asks an old friend, a surprise friend, about how he should deal with retirement. Take a look.
Now that is a great move. Yeah, it's good for me. It's good for me. Here's the beauty of this whole thing. You've got all the time in the world to figure this out. You can just be you for a while, if you know how to do that again. So I can just be me. Look here. Look here. Yeah. You want one?
I got to say, that brought down the house.
Fantastic.
One last puff of a cigarette. Juan, you were there. How did the president do?
I think he did very well, and I think he's done well in terms of the performances at these dinners. Chris, you've been there, so you would know. I thought there were two great lines. The one actually was a visual thing where he said, you know, my ratings numbers keep going up. Nobody can figure it out. And then they put up the pictures of Cruz and Trump. The disappointment, and he was also funny when he said he's going to go to Goldman Sachs and repeat some of these jokes and make a lot of Tubmans, you know. But I think the disappointing part was the comedian Larry Wilmore. You know, Obama at the end, he drops the mic, right? Well, Wilmore just dropped into the most scurrilous kind of language and racial language. After praising the president as the first black man, leader of the free world, he uses the N-word and talks about my N-word. It was so awful. It was embarrassing to America. But I think to black people, to black America, it was awful. It was degrading and suggested somehow that this president is only to be judged in that manner. I was so disappointed because I was hoping for Larry Wilmore to knock the ball out the park.
Karl, you were a top advisor in the Bush White House. As you just told us, you were forced by the president to go every year to the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Actually, the press shop, but that's another thing.
Okay, why do presidents go to such trouble to kill at this event?
Because there are 3,500 people in the room who buy ink by the barrel and videotape by the mile, and you better perform well or you will be excoriated in every newspaper and on every network. And we will spend lots of time on Sunday morning talk programs talking about your performance. I thought the president did best when he was making fun of himself, and did worse when he spent way too much time taking every one of his adversaries in the media and politics and doing them in.
He actually didn't do much about the media. He really went after the other politicians. Thank you, panel.